Hey, what's up, everybody? Derrick Broze, the Conscious Resistance Network, and I am now back in Mexico after going to Washington, D.C. to report on the Epstein press conference and the Stand with Survivors rally. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who donated to my crowdfunding campaign. I put it up literally a day or two before I headed to D.C. to see if anybody out there wanted to support my efforts to help me recoup my costs, because as an independent journalist, I don't have big corporations behind me. I only have you, all of you who choose to invest in my work and support me where and when you can. And it's not easy. It's not cheap, for sure, especially in Washington, D.C. So I did the math yesterday, and it actually cost me, I was estimating $800. It actually cost me $1,013 US to make this trip. So the crowdfunding campaign is still up for another day or so. If you would like to contribute to me, I will put the link below. Again, 5, 10, any amount of dollars goes to just supporting me, and in this case, helping me make the money back. And before I share my thoughts, because this is kind of a debrief of my thoughts on the press conference, I did want to say a couple of things. What I was able to do is, and with your support and with going out there, was I took 50 or more photos of the press conference. I'm not a photographer by trade, but I dabble a little bit. I think about 20 of them were worth checking out, and I posted them on my Substack, Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, those places. So if you're only watching videos and you want to see the photos, I'll put a link to the Substack. So I got those photos. I also was able to ask a question during the press conference, which I'll talk about more in a moment, which I think was really important because it brought up Les Wexner. And then I also was able to document the Stand with Survivors rally and the press conference and edit that together in a 33-minute video that kind of highlighted what I think are some of the most important bits. If you want to watch the entire press conference, there's plenty of, mainstream news that you can find on YouTube that has the entire thing. But what I did to try to save you guys some time was to just take the little highlights, and I'm going to cover some of that today of what I think was the most important bit. So I produced a 30-minute highlight reel. I took 20 plus photos. I got to ask a question at the press conference. And my main goal, which unfortunately didn't happen, was to interview Bradley Edwards again, the lead attorney who's been representing the Jeffrey Epstein victims since the mid-2000s. And you might remember that I interviewed him back in 2018, asking him about, at that point, Jeffrey Epstein was still alive or still around, wherever he is. And this was December 2018, and I went to one of the civil lawsuits and was able to talk to him. And this is the interview where a lot of the Trumpers, the MAGA people, have taken my interview. I think they maybe they don't take it out of context, because they do quote Bradley Edwards in his own words. But I do think that they use that then to act as if it exonerates Trump, and that's just simply not accurate. I have to apologize as well, guys. Please excuse my dog in the background. I am puppy sitting right now, and he loves me, but I'm not the same as Miriam, so he's sad that she just left. Anyways, so I was hoping to interview Bradley Edwards again to get him on the record and say, hey, man, everybody thinks that your words have exonerated Trump, and maybe we don't know Trump's guilty of anything, but it's more complex than that, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But let me just start with that and say that I did get to see Bradley Edwards, and as soon as I went up to him and said, hey, I remember you, and I told him, I said, did you know our interview has gone viral over the years? Even Fox News tried to buy it from me, Sean Hannity, which I did not let them do. And he said, yeah, every time the video goes viral, my young son, he sends me the clips and shows it to me. He's like, I definitely know who you are. And I told him, I said, look, I would love to interview today. And this, you got to understand, this press conference, based on the video, if you haven't seen it, again, all the links will be in the description. It was a circus like I thought it was going to be. There was independent media, like myself. There was some mainstream alternative media, who I won't name, but they were out there. And then there was the corporate media, legacy media, right? And then, of course, there was Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna and some other politicians, cops everywhere. There was protesters. It was quite a show. So there was a lot going on. But I went up to Bradley Edwards. We had this conversation. I said, look, I'd love to interview you again. He said, let's do it after the press conference. And I was fine with that. One thing he did tell me is, a couple of months ago, and if you follow me on various social media, you've seen me share this clip. A couple of months ago, he gave an interview on MSNBC where he said this was about Ghislaine Maxwell potentially being pardoned and now, of course, moved to a minimum security prison. He was saying, I may have been too trusting of Trump in the past. That's what he told MSNBC. I brought that up to him, and I said, I heard you say that. And he said, you know what? He kind of laughed. He said, I might say that again today. He basically confirmed. He's like, I probably was too trusting of Trump in the past. So I thought that was interesting. Then the press conference started. There was all kinds of course, different women, some of them who have previously spoken up. And I want to say this first. Look, two things. I don't necessarily automatically believe women. I know that's a big rallying cry, and it has been since Me Too. Women do lie, just like men lie, and people lie in general, right? And they can make up things, especially when money is involved. I'm not, saying any of the women involved in this thing were lying for money or anything like that. But I'm also acknowledging that I believe, and I've seen the comments out there, that many of you are skeptical of these women. And I think most of you are doing so because Trump told you that it's a Democratic hoax. But nevertheless, let's at least start with that point. It should be clear and obvious that everybody is not always honest. And so a woman, just like a man, any one person can potentially lie if they think there's a financial benefit. So I know that there's people skeptical of these women. I don't automatically just believe people. And then as a journalist, I have to be objective. So when I talk about these women, I think survivors is a stronger term than saying victim. Some people don't like, it's like, oh, I'm a victim. No, I'm a survivor. Okay. Either way, whether we call them victims or survivors, they are alleged survivors, alleged victims, because for the most part, especially the women who were first-time speakers, these claims haven't been tested in any kind of court of law, whether a civil trial, criminal trial, etc. A couple of them were people who testified at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. Besides that, though, the women who are speaking forward for the first time, coming forward, those claims haven't been tested. So they are alleged. So I want to make that clear. And so if you're skeptical right off the bat, because I'm seeing the comments, and I think some of you are just hateful and you're just Trump supporters, and because Trump told you it's a Democrat hoax, you don't want to believe anything. And I'm going to talk more about that. But so let's just make that point known. These women are making their claims. I haven't verified them. They haven't been verified in the court of law. It is what it is. Nevertheless, this was a press conference with Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna have a new bill. Pugsley have a new bill that they are trying to force through using what's called a discharge petition. Meanwhile, Speaker Mike Johnson and the House Oversight Committee are claiming they're trying to do their own investigation, but they're basically expecting the DOJ to report on itself. And it's just not going to happen. Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna are saying that their bill, which, by the way, every single survivor there, alleged survivor I'm not going to keep saying alleged over, so you guys know the point I made. These women all said, we support the bill. The mainstream line of attack, especially with Mike Johnson, is that, oh, these women don't support the bill because it could reveal victims' names. Thomas Massie and them, they wrote the bill very clear, so it's not going to just reveal somebody's names that doesn't want to be revealed. That's just not going to happen. That's just the BS talking point that they're trying to use. So all the women there said, we want the bill to pass. Sign the petition. And all the Democrats are signing it, which is what Trump is using to say, this is just a Democratic hoax. But currently the only Republicans are Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think Nancy Mace is her name, and then there was 3 women. So like the majority of them that are speaking forward are women. And, that's unfortunate. But so that's what the main purpose of this press conference is, that they were coming forward to promote their bill and to discuss, their effort to release all the files. Then at the same time, there was the Stand With Survivors rally happening right nearby. And that's when Virginia Giuffre's 2 half-brothers and sister-in-law and other survivors were coming forward and were just expressing themselves for the first time. So those were 2 things happening on Wednesday morning for the first time. And I want to make a couple points. There's so many people being blackpilled on the internet. And it's funny because I've been being accused of being blackpilled for the last year for calling out Trump. So I don't mean to kind of play into that. But some of you out there who just can't take a moment to say like, okay, this is a positive development. They wanted Epstein to disappear, but now it's back in the news, and there's a press conference taking place on the steps of the Capitol building, U.S. Capitol building, and there's new survivors coming forward, and international corporate media are there, independent media, even mainstream alternative media. That to me is a positive. That's a plus. That is spreading of awareness. Now, maybe for some of you out there who aren't activists, and I do For those of you who don't ever hit the streets and pass out flyers, I don't care how old you are, what kind of job you got going on, you're not going to understand the struggle of being somebody who cares about an issue and goes to the street and tries to pass out a flyer and like get somebody to listen, and how good it feels when people actually do listen to you. You just won't understand that struggle. So for me though, as somebody who's been reporting about Jeffrey Epstein for a decade now, who put out a documentary on Jeffrey Epstein in 2018, who went to Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion in 2018, who went to the civil trial in December 2018, to see this happening, it's a positive development. Now, does that mean I think these bills are going to pass and the truth is going to be revealed? No, not at all. I don't think the political solution is the answer. I don't think it's even going to succeed. But I took a moment of celebrating that this is a positive development, and I think that's okay. We have to be able to celebrate the wins where we get them. And some of you, I think, are just so black-pilled that you're just like, it's all a show. These women are, actors. This is just another limited hangout, psyop, blah, blah, whatever. And those things could be true. And at the same time, it's also positive that the issue's not dying down, that it's being brought up, it's being taken seriously. Of course, we know the Democrats largely are just using it as a cudgel against Donald Trump. And unfortunately, I posted about this last night because the propaganda has gotten so strong last year. Most of the people who were calling for releasing all the Epstein files were Republicans, conservatives, not all of them, but the most of them. And here we are a year later, and the majority of people calling for releasing the Epstein files are Democrats or left-leaning people. And all the right-leaning MAGA people are saying it's a psyop, it's a hoax, because they're all trapped in the left-right paradigm. And only very few of us, including myself, stay consistent and call for truth no matter who's in office, no matter what side is doing it. And I think that's what really matters. So you have to stand for truth no matter who's in office. So the press conference, I think, was a historic thing. I think it was a positive. It doesn't mean that the bill that Massey's trying to do is going to pass. It doesn't mean that this other effort by the House Oversight Committee is going to lead anywhere new. They released 33,000 files on Monday, I think it was. And the majority of them, not only did they do it in a way that's very difficult to download and to search, so it's going to take forever for everybody to go through all of them, but what we've seen with the majority of them was that they are things that already exist. Like, some of them were videos of walking through Epstein's house. Guys, you can find those same videos in my 2018 documentary. Those videos have been around the internet for quite some time. Will there be anything new in there? We'll see. But they did it in such a way that it's not easy to find and search. So I think that was done on purpose. So that's kind of one part, is the part about the bill, the part about, the purpose of the rally. And like I said, I don't think that's going to change the world, but I still think there are some positive developments. So let's talk about some of the other points. I think there's 4 or 5 main highlights of this press conference that you need to know. Let me go through some of my highlights here. I'll share also this. I kind of already have said this, but this is one of the other posts I made after I came back. I know it's easy and trendy to be black-pilled about everything, especially Epstein, but I think that the press conference and the rally were a positive sign. Do I think the government is going to reveal more secrets? Absolutely not. But we had alleged victims, politicians, and lots of media in front of the Capitol talking about sexual abuse of children and the people and the powerful people involved. This is a huge step forward. I definitely can tell you that when I was reporting on Epstein in 2016, there was zero chance that this was going to happen. So, like I said, I think it's a positive thing. We'll see where it goes. Now, I also made this post. Here's one thing. So, of course, even as every single alleged victim was speaking at the press conference, they all said, this is a bipartisan effort. This is not about Republican, Democrat, etc. And in fact, some of them said, I'm a Republican. This is not about, being a Democrat hoax. And some of them directly challenged Trump and said, Trump, come down here. Talk to me. You think this is a hoax? Listen to my testimony. Speak to me directly. Don't ignore us. And of course, Trump says that it's a hostile move by Massey and that it's just Democratic hoax. So here's one thing. At the press conference, Brad Edwards, who, like I said, I was trying to interview, was asked if anybody currently serving as a U.S. politician is listed in the Epstein documents that he's seen. And he said, I don't think I can answer that question. So that was interesting. The other thing, here's my main points. These are the highlights. The alleged victims, they said that they are going to create their own list of co-conspirators based on their experiences of people that they met and they interacted with. So stay tuned for that. We'll see what happens. And some people, again, I've seen people being critical saying, they said it's going to be a confidential list amongst themselves first, and then they will share it eventually. That's their choice. I'm sure it will come out in the public, but So that's a positive thing, because they're like, look, we're not going to wait for these files. We can all talk with each other and like, hey, who did you see? Who did you know? Who was there? And it's not just about the politicians. This is another point that was made at the press conference. It's not just the high profile politicians that everybody's obsessed with. You also had Epstein's butlers and guards. You had police officers who were helping him in Miami who knew that he was abusing women and ignored things. Like, there's a lot of co-conspirators that aren't famous people that should be held accountable. Number two, Brad Edwards started listing the agencies where he said people should be focusing on FOIA and filing open records requests. He said the CIA, the SEC, FinCEN, and there was a couple others. You can find this in my 30-minute highlight reel. One of the women mentioned flying on a plane to Africa with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein. So that was interesting. Obviously, we know Clinton was involved in one way or the other. One of the other points was that the women said that Jeffrey Epstein liked to brag about all the famous people he met. He knew, this is something we've known before, but they said that his biggest brag was Donald Trump. Make of what that will. That's what you will. That's what they said. The other big thing, I think, was my question about Les Wexner, which if you haven't seen it, wherever you're watching this from on video platforms, you can go and see one of the last couple videos I posted. It's just a 45-second clip of me asking Brad Edwards and the survivors, did any of you have any interactions with Les Wexner? Of course, Les Wexner is the founder of the Limited Brands, Victoria's Secret, very powerful billionaire from Ohio, and some people believe he was Jeffrey Epstein's financier. He's largely gotten away with all this. He was definitely involved. You have the Mega Group, which is made up of wealthy Jewish financiers, and I've got reporting on this going back 7, 8, 9 years. I will put the links below. Okay, and then this is the last thought that I shared on that post. Okay, so I get that people are super skeptical of the potential for anything to come out of this, or you're skeptical of the women themselves. Part of me understands I'm very skeptical of the attorneys, and I plan to ask them about some tangential connections to intelligence, and this is what we're going to talk about in just a moment. At the same time, as I said, somebody who's been reporting on Epstein since 2016, I celebrate this issue, that it's not dying down, so keep your blackpilling, keep your cynicism. I don't want to hear it. I think you're just missing the bigger picture. And that's fine. You don't have to take a moment to celebrate like me, but don't act like it doesn't mean anything. So here's the questions I was going to ask Brad Edwards. And I want to give credit to Johnny Vedmore. Johnny and I are not necessarily collaborators or friends. We're colleagues in the sense of being journalists. He has a feud with my friend and colleague Whitney Webb that I'm staying out of. But Johnny, as far as I know, is one of the only people to point out that Brad Edwards, the attorney, as well as the other attorney involved in this, Stanley Pottinger, and then David Boies, have some crazy intelligence connections. And essentially, Brad Edwards, who is the lead attorney for these victims for the last 2 decades, is surrounded by spooks. So there's numerous connections surrounding the attorneys. Here's some of the connections that Johnny Vedmore brought up and that I started to dig into. And this is what I would have asked Bradley Edwards if I got to interview him. Besides trying to say, hey, can you follow up with some of the statements you made about Trump back in 2018? This would have been my main focus. So David Boies, who's, again, one of the attorneys who worked with Brad Edwards, who represented some of the victims, he had connections to Harvey Weinstein because he was actually, it's kind of weird, this dude who defends victims of Jeffrey Epstein was also defending and representing Harvey Weinstein. And according to New York Times, New Yorker, and plenty of public reporting out there, David Boies had a contract with Black Cube. And if you guys remember Black Cube, this was, you probably heard the story that the Black Cube was working with Harvey Weinstein to try to go after people who were reporting on his abuse of women. And then the Black Cube is connected to Mossad, connected to Israeli intelligence. So David Boies, one of the attorneys representing the Epstein victims, was also representing Harvey Weinstein and had a contract with Black Cube, who is connected to Mossad. Kind of weird. Also, Alfredo Rodriguez, who was Epstein, sometimes known as the butler, he was more like the house manager. His journal showed, and the notes of who had called Epstein over the years, his notes show that David Boies had called Epstein on February 25th, 2005. Very curious. So the attorney who a decade later would go on to represent some of the victims of Epstein was calling Epstein 20 years ago. I don't know what that means, but I wanted to ask Brad Edwards his opinions. And this is all coming from Brad Edwards' book, Relentless Pursuit. And at the same time, Brad Edwards said he was even more suspicious of David Broze because when he went to go meet him, he realized that David Broze's office was in the same building as Epstein's main attorney. I don't know what that means, but it's sure deserves follow-up. Then the second attorney, Stanley Pottinger. This guy is definitely suspected of being a CIA agent. Brad Edwards, in his own book, claimed that he thought he was maybe a CIA agent. He said that he was concerned that Stanley Pottinger was actually working for Epstein. This guy just shows up and is like, hey, man, I heard you're representing the victims. I want to meet you and take you out to lunch and ask you some questions, and starts just digging into things. And different times, Brad Edwards thinks, like, is he trying to take me off the case? Is he trying to get me to focus on this area and not this area? So Brad Edwards was concerned that Stanley Pottinger was working for Epstein. He said that when he went to go meet with him, he was so concerned that he bought a recording device from a spy shop. And Pottinger, like David Broze, who, like I said, David Broze had called Epstein, according to Epstein's house manager back in 2005, Pottinger told Brad Edwards that he actually knew Epstein, that he said they briefly worked together in the past. They're like, oh, no big deal. We just happened to briefly work together. Very, very weird, to say the least. And then also in his book, Brad Edwards was saying he was like he called Pottinger like a 007 or something like that. So I don't know. David Broze and Stanley Pottinger working with Brad Edwards, suspicious of both of them. Do they work for Epstein? Do they work for Mossad? Are they CIA? All kinds of weird stuff. And you could say maybe Brad Edwards is CIA. Maybe he's naive because he continues to work on the case and he continues to work with both of these men. And in fact, the other lead attorney that was there at the press conference with him is a woman named Brittany Henderson. And I haven't looked deeply into her, but I know Brittany Henderson has worked with Stanley Pottinger as well and David Broze. And if you go back to my question, or you go back to watch my video and you see when the guy says, as far as you know, was anybody currently serving in U.S. politics, was anybody in the Epstein files that's currently serving? And Edwards kind of like, and then you see him in my video. He looks back to a woman standing behind him. That's Brittany Henderson. And she goes, no. And then he turns back and he's like, I don't think I can answer that. I don't know what that means, and I don't know if Brittany Henderson's involved in intelligence. I don't know, but those are the questions I wanted to ask him. Unfortunately, as the press conference ended, I mean, like I said, it was a circus. He got mobbed, so I kind of quickly grabbed my camera and I walked over to him and I followed Brad Edwards and Brittany Henderson all the way to the steps of the Capitol as they were going in to make their exit. And media's all around them and screaming. And I kept saying, Edwards, like, can we do this? Can we do this? And they were just like, it was too intense. And Brittany Henderson's like, we know who you are. We know who you are. And Edwards like, I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. So there was so much going on, and she actually tried to give me her phone number. I don't have a phone, but I don't have a cell phone service. Some of you know that, but I do take a phone with me on the road in case I need to use Wi-Fi. It's just easier sometimes. I happen to have that phone in my pocket, and she said, give me your phone. So I was like, okay. And she typed in her number. She's like, I don't want to say this out loud with all these people around. She gave me her number, allegedly, and it didn't save. So I wasn't able to call her to arrange an interview in person or online with her or Brad Edwards, and I hope I can still do that. I'm going to be emailing them and trying to find them, because that was largely the main reason I came to this press conference. And I do have those questions. I want to ask Edwards, what do you think about, was Broze, the attorney you worked with, connected to Mossad? Or why was he working for Black Cube? Why did he call Epstein back in 2005? Why did Stanley Pottinger say he worked for Epstein? Do you think he's CIA? Are you CIA? Is Brittany Henderson CIA? It just makes the whole story all the more weird. And I know a lot of you have suspicions about Virginia Roberts, Gouffre. You have suspicions about these new survivors. I have suspicions about the whole thing. Like I said, I'm celebrating the fact that the issue isn't dying, but I don't necessarily think we're getting the full story by any stretch of the imagination. So thank you again, everybody who supported me. That's what I saw, in my day and a half, 2 days in DC. I was trying to go out there to learn more about the whole National Guard situation. I might do a separate video about that. But if you want to see everything I did, like I said, I'll put a link to the Substack. You can see all the photos I took. Watch the 30-minute highlight reel. Watch the 44-second clip of me asking about Les Wexner. That's the last thing I'll mention. I did get to ask about Les Wexner. Nobody else mentioned him. And it got brought up. There's some newspapers reporting on it in Ohio. So because of my question, his name is in the news. So that's cool. And yeah, this is all thanks to you, the guys, though, because You know, I've got money to spend out of my own pocket, but it sucks to spend over $1,000 to go to DC for 3 days. Man, staying in DC for 3 days costs more, just like an Airbnb or a hotel, costs more than half of my month's rent in Mexico. But I did that because this story matters. So if you want to support me, you believe in what I'm doing, invest in my work so I can keep doing that. You can either donate directly to the crowdfunding campaign below, or you can become a monthly supporter on Substack or buy me a coffee. You can send me cash in the mail. Just go to theconsciousresistance.com/invest to see all the different ways you can support me. And I'm going to stay on this story. I'm not going to let it die down. Whether we know the truth or not, we're going to try to search for the truth. So thank you guys so much. Until next time, remember, you're powerful, you're beautiful.